My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 72. We're the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star, aka me, shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle, Big 12 Huddle, Fourth and Florida, and New Stream. All right, today we are a little bit shorthanded. It's just going to be me and that former national champion winner, aka Trey Neal. So I really only have one person introduced, and that's Mr. Trey Neal. So Trey, why don't you come on stage?
Man, I thought you said you weren't introducing me. I thought we were just going to get right into it.
Get right into it. All right, well, let's get right into it. So you might have noticed last week, if you do follow and listen to our podcast, that we did not release an episode. That is because, unfortunately, the episode got deleted into the cloud, into the sphere, somewhere out in the internet world that is gone. So that's why there was no podcast last week, even though we did record one. It just didn't get released. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we spoke about last week when it comes to UCF football and basketball, primarily the transfers that came in last week and the prior week that we got deleted, as well as some of the new coaching hires that happened over the past week or so. So Trey, let's get right into it. Obviously Coach Frost has kind of slowly been filling out the remainder of his staff. Early on, we already knew about guys like Mackenzie Milton and obviously Sean Beckton. We were waiting really for him to finish out the rest of the position coaches for the most part. There had been, maybe 3 or 4 hires, but now it is pretty much completed. So we'll just kind of go over each guy. So what happened this past week, the newest one, which kind of came out of left field, was special teams coach Pete Alamar was hired. This is a veteran of 30 plus years in the coaching world. Most recently was at FIU, and at Rice. Excuse me, he was at Rice for the last couple of years as the special teams coordinator, which is the role he'll take over at UCF. Replaces Brian Blackman. This is a guy that's in his, I think he's like mid 60s. He's been around forever. Coached at a ton of Power 4 schools, but most recently at Rice. This is a name that really I did not hear any sort of rumors or anything about that. I don't know what kind of connection he has to Frost, if any at all. It's not like someone that coached at UCF in the past or at Nebraska or anything like that, to my knowledge. So I didn't know much about him, but obviously he's a veteran. He's got a ton of experience. By all accounts, when I was looking at his the write-up on him, and it's, special teams defense, punt return yard defense, just in general, good, solid, foundation. Special teams have been, his rap really for the past 30 years. I think Rice was top the 2 years here. They were top like 15 nationally in special team, yards or defensive yards. So it seems on paper like a good hire. Trey, what do you know about this guy? Is this someone that, you were in college football? Was this a name that got around a lot, or what do you know about him?
I'm not super familiar with him. The thing that I've always thought was weird but very interesting about college football, and I think just football in general, is just where people make the connections and like those strings that get people on staff. Like, I don't know anything about Coach Alamar. Like, I have nothing about him, know nothing about him. But somehow through some connection, Coach Frost hired him. Obviously, Coach Frost is going to vet guys who he thinks can contribute, who he thinks are good football coaches. I don't know exactly what that process is, what kind of questions he's asking, things like that. But like you mentioned, 30 years in the profession, I think to me, what it looks like, at least to me, Frost is kind of picking around to guys he might think are very experienced, because I think this is, like you said, I think we've talked about it, ad nauseum now. This is a different UCF than almost 10 years ago when he first came. We're in a different space. We're in a different place. We have different expectations even. So I think he's built his program, and I think he's trying to build it somewhere where he has a lot of experienced guys, a lot of experienced people that have been a lot of different places, seen a lot of different stuff, versus when he first came on, it was a lot of guys who were kind of fresh, raw, green, which I think they both have their pros and cons to it. I just think, we're in a more experienced league. You want to get those experienced coaches. I told you that was the biggest difference for me. Even just going from the AAC to the Big Ten was just the coaching experience everybody we played had. We were young at UCF. Throw us in the Big Ten with Urban Meyer, guy from Wisconsin. I forget, like, so many, Kurt Frentz, who was just, he was there. Like, all those coaches, Mark D'Antoni.
Sure.
Super experienced NFL track records, or they had been coaching for 20, 30 years. So I think that's what Frost was trying to surround himself with. Obviously, with guys like, Mackenzie Milton and Coach Harris, where I'm sure we'll get to. They're a little bit young bloods, but I think at their positions, that's what you want. I think at special teams, you want somebody who's been around, seen a lot, done a lot, been different places, seen different things work. So it'll be interesting. I know we've been complaining about our special teams for the last few years. Yeah. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting guy. And Rogers, as what's the biggest thing we should look for in a good special teams coach? I mean, to me, any good coach, you just want to be fundamentally sound. I know that's basic. I know it's cliche, but I think, in my opinion, you lose a lot more football games than you win. And most of the times it comes down to those little things. And most of the time those things are like fundamentals. Like, I mean, we lost a few games just because we couldn't kick, but I know it's like, we're like, oh, we just need to get a new kicker. But I remember at the TCU game, we gave up like 3 blocked field goals. Who knows how, and I'm not giving anybody a blame to it, but who knows how that impacts your kicker when he's like, okay, I'm getting every one of my field goals blocked. Now I need to change something. And that can change everything. So I think, just to me, what makes a good special teams coach is what makes a good any coach. If you teach good fundamentals and you stress those fundamentals, I think that's the base of any good coach. And then there's things where, skip schematics and things like that. You want to get creative, but you want to teach guys the right way. So to answer Roger's question.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And like you said, special teams is something we've been complaining about for a while. And Brian Blackman had to go. It's been kind of a maligned position now for a little while, whether it's, punt returns or blocked field goals, like you said, or just kicker struggles that we saw with Colton Boomer. So I think it was time to go. But, it's interesting for us. I think in the beginning, when he first got hired, in the first couple hires that he had, there was, some complaints thrown his way that he's just keeping people directly in a circle or going back into the Nebraska pool, whether it was, Becton, who's obviously UCF and Nebraska, or Mackenzie, or, Duval and some of these guys. But I think overall,
Coach yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think now that we have a full view of the entire staff, it's been a nice mixture. You have, yes, the guys that were part of some of his previous staffs, but you have some really young guys like KZ and like Brandon Harris. You have some old wily vets like this new Alamar here, and you have guys that are completely out of circle. I mean, the App State coach that is now our offensive line coach. I think there's a really good mix of former head coaches, up and coming guys that are in their 20s, early 30s, and then veterans and guys that are in his circle and then that are completely out of his circle. So I think he's assembled a good staff overall. I mean, obviously you never know until they get playing on the field and you start to see what units are stronger, what position groups are playing well versus others, who's getting, how do the players mesh with their position coach? Do they like them? Are they recruiting well?
Exactly.
It's not just on the field, but it's also, can they recruit well, which we saw, some of that in the Gus era. There was some really good position coaches that recruited well, but so we talked about Alamar, but the other ones that were hired more, kind of 2 weeks ago that we had previously talked about, which talk about again. But let's start, on the offensive side of balls. So the two positions that were missing were running back and tight ends. Now, tight ends, I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're going, last year Blackman was the tight ends and special teams coordinator. When you look at Alamar's experience, pretty much at every place he's been the tight ends and special teams coordinator. The graphic that was released just said special teams. There's rumors it could be him. There's also rumors that it could be our OC that's doing the tight end. So I don't think they're going to hire a new or what was that?
That's who I would think it would be, because I think that's what Coop did. What I remember at Nebraska, he was. I don't know if he did low time, but I know he has tight end history. So that would be my guess.
I just don't think they're going to hire like another person. I think it's going to be one of the current coaches that will take on the multi-role kind of thing. So, so really, all that was left really on offense, if we don't count the tight end, was running backs. And it was announced that it's going to be Jimmy Beal, who, most recently was at Utah State. This is a guy that's really moved up the coaching ranks. I mean, he's not necessarily a young guy. He's been in the coaching rank, in the coaching profession now for quite some time, but he was a lot of times he was in the FCS level. He's coached at Montana State. He's coached at Northern Arizona. He's coached at South Dakota State. These are some teams that actually UCF has played FCS teams in the past. Montana State. Then it looks like he kind of got his first big break a couple years ago when he got hired by San Diego State. And then last year he was at Utah State. But at San Diego State, the Aztecs that year averaged 154 rushing yards per game. And then this past season for Utah State, they were top 10 in rushing yards nationally. So, and then when he was in the FCS level, I mean, I'm looking here at the stats, essentially every year at Montana State, he had like a top 3 rushing attack. So by all accounts, Jimmy Beal seems to be a very, very strong running back coach. It is his first, Power 4 gig, and it's actually only his 3rd season at the FBS level in general. But I mean, you could see that he's moved up through the ranks and he's been successful at every stop, which is why I think he continues to move up. So Trey, I mean, what do you know about Jimmy Beal, or what do you think about the hire?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things where I think Frost is kind of digging deep. Again, he's been in, it says 19 years coaching. So
19 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. You've seen, I mean, that's a big variety. You're talking, like you said, 2006 to 2025. Football has changed a lot in that time span. And like you said, he's worked his way up. There's something that's to be said about guys who kind of go through the grind, maybe not just, climb the ladder super fast and just jump. Because, you can look at it as a good thing or a bad thing. I think this guy is to have top rushing production in, I wouldn't call these like blue blood places. Utah State, you're not getting the best of the best recruits. Montana State, you're not getting the best of the best kind of athletes, players. And to have that, I think, it could be a multitude of reasons. I think the running backs coach has something to do with that. I think that you have to give that credit to coaching these guys up. So I think it's a good hire. I'm not really you're going to hear me say that a lot. I think all of these guys are good hires, but like you said, I think it's a wait and see for everybody. I think it's a wait and see for guys that we've seen before, just because this is a different thing. Like, yeah, what we did in the past is great. What what Coach Beal did, what, Coach Clark, who we'll get to, what they've done is great. It's what can you do for me now? Sadly, that's the business we're in. What can you do for what we have on the roster? We're going into a season where we lost a lot of guys to the portal. And we're going to get a lot of guys to the portal. How are we going to integrate these guys? How are we going to use these guys? I think Coach Beal's walking into a great situation, because that's one thing I will not knock Gus is he recruited running back every year, it seemed like, and he recruited heavy, so I don't think there's going to be a talent deficit in the running back room. I think we have plenty of guys. I think, we signed one of those running backs before we even had a head coach. I think we should be fine. So I don't think there should be any issues. I think, losing RJ is tough, but, running back by committee, that's what Frost was doing anyway in the past. It was Adrian Killens, it was Otis Anderson, it was Cordarian, it was Jawan Hamilton.
Yeah, it's all over. They used a lot of guys.
Because that's just what the game is turning to now, is just different kind of weapons, using guys differently. I think Coach Beal has a plenty versatile room. So we'll see. I think he should be able to have good success. But yeah, I don't know too much about him. I don't know too much about really a lot of these guys, which I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that Frost kind of went out and didn't just kind of recycle what he's already tried. I know everybody says to do it sometimes and not do it sometimes. I think you have to do what you think is best. And I think it's good that he kind of branched out a little bit and did a little bit different. So I think that's what it is. And Roger told me to get to.
Yeah, I agree. And
yeah.
Right. And yeah, I agree. And just, just a quick thing about Beal's resume. He made the FCS playoffs 5 times in his coaching career. And with Montana State, which also happens to be his alma mater,
Yep.
He did make the 2021 FCS championship game. So he's played in some big games, obviously on a different level, but he has played in the playoffs quite a few times, or coached, I should say, in the playoffs quite a few times. And when I'm looking here, Montana State's rushing statistics, essentially every year he was there, were top, 10 in the country. I see 3rd in rushing yards per game in 2022. They had, in yards per carry, they were third in rushing yards per game. They rushed for at least 200 yards in 20 of his 29 games while he was the coach there. So, he clearly has has coached some really good running backs room and been able to develop some running backs. So, running back has never really been a problem for UCF in a long time. Really, when you date it back to Frost up until last season with obviously RJ Harvey. So, I'm not too worried there. We had a good running back coach the last couple of years under Gus, but I think Jimmy Beal will do just fine. And he has a lot of, that running back room is real young right now. Outside of Miles Montgomery, you have, essentially 2 freshmen and Tavion Swint, and I'm drawing the blank on the other guy's name, but there's, 2 very young running backs in that room. So it'd be good to get them coached up. And then we also have a transfer. And Miles Montgomery is a veteran, but he's, still really only played like 1 or 2 years of, serious minutes on the field. So, all right. So moving on.
And it's one of those things I don't think again, I think it's going to be where Gus always leaned on that guy he trusted. Frost, when you earn Frost's trust, he's going to get you the football. He's not just going to say, hey, bell cow me 30 times a game. He's going to utilize everybody's skill set, because I think that's what made the offense diverse and unique, was just everybody had such versatile skill sets. They could be used differently, So I think, Miles Montgomery, it might be his time to come up, but there's guys on the roster that might do something better than him or different, and they're going to get on the field for that. They just have to show it to Frost. And Tim says, what would you tell a potential recruit, offense or defense, about what a Frost practice is like? To me, those practices were fun, man. It's very different because Frost wants you to have fun. It's not hard practice in the sense, because it's not long, but you're going to give 100% all the time. The hardest part is going to be the stretch. If they do that still, the stretch is the hardest part, because it's up tempo, super explosive, and it's running the whole way through. It's not like you get a rep in practice where it might be 7 seconds hard and you're resting a little bit. No, you're knocking everything out fast. It's fun, upbeat music bumping, having fun. Coach Frost is going to be having fun, and he's going to energize his coaches to do that. I think that's one thing. If the coaches haven't done it before, that's what they're going to do, is that they're going to have a blast. And that's the kind of energy that rubs off on the players, because that's what guys want. Maybe it's different now with the money and the NIL and stuff, but ultimately you just want to have fun doing, your quote unquote job. I think that's what anybody in the world wants, So that's what Frost is definitely going to bring. It's going to be fast, fun, and it's going to, they're going to have fun doing it.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It'd be interesting to see, how things are different this time around. But so then let's move on to defensive side of the ball. There was 2 hires there. Let's start with Brandon Harris. So that is UCF's new defensive backs coach. This is a guy that I think a lot of people are excited about. This guy is Florida thick and thin. He's only coached at Florida schools. He played at the University of Miami, and most recently was a DB coach and co-defensive coordinator at Florida Atlantic. Also coached at Miami. Coached for a year at Florida State. So essentially he's been to every Florida school here, every Power 4 school here except for Florida.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he's been moving up the ranks real fast. He's in his 30s. This is a guy that was selected in the second round of the 2011 NFL draft by the Texans, played for about 6 seasons in the NFL. And obviously was, a guy that was really good at Miami. Someone that left school early to enter the NFL draft, but since then, he's been really, rising up the coaching ranks. And this is a guy I think we needed another guy that had a South Florida pipeline. We had that during Frost's first tenure. I guess during the hype era, we had Randy Shannon. But really in the Gus era, there was Tim Harris Jr., but he was, not there for the entire of Gus's era. So we've always had at least one big South Florida guy. You need that. There's a lot of great, programs in South Florida, Booker T, Miami Central, Miami Norland, all Miami Northwestern. So there's a lot of great programs that, you can pull talent from. So having a guy like Harris that, coached at the best school in South Florida, or best program in the real South Florida, Miami, having a guy there with that type of pipeline and those types of schools is really, really good. So I'm excited about this one. This guy, his mid-30s, he'll be our DB coach. So he'll primarily coach cornerbacks. So he's going to replace the guy we had from Auburn for just a season. So, DBs has been historically a very, very strong position for UCF, but in recent years, it's been a little shaky. Although you are seeing 2 UCF DBs were invited to the Reese Senior Bowl. So that is good to see. But overall, it's been a little bit of a shaky secondary, at least compared to what we're used to. So I think Brandon Harris will make a big difference. What do you think, Trey?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, I'm from Georgia, but anytime you can get into South Florida, anytime you can get anywhere in Florida, you've got to hit it hard, especially being in UCF. We're at the center of the whole state. We have to be able to recruit South Florida strong. We have to be able to recruit Central Florida strong. We need to be able to recruit North Florida strong. You live down here in South Florida. I live in Miami. I know the talent is oozing. I mean, some of the best players that I played with are from Miami or the South Florida, Broward, South Florida area.
Broward County.
It's just they're naturally gifted to play football, man. I don't know what else it is. I say it's something in the water down here. I don't know what it is, but those guys can run. They're super skilled, and they're just really skilled guys. And getting a guy who played at the University of Miami, not boosting it, it's just he knows what it is. That's the same kind of mentality. He knows the talent around here. He coached at FAU as the DB's coach. He knows what he needs to do. I don't necessarily know his philosophies. Playing 6 years in the NFL, to me, that's a check box I always like with my DB coach. It's just me personally as a DB. I know a lot of these guys want to play on Sundays. I think everybody in college thinks they can play on Sunday. So why not go get guys who have done it? He might not have been an elite player, but he's seen the best of the best. He played in the league. You've seen what it looks like. That's where he can help pour into these young guys. And I think that's what we need, man. I think, like you said, I committed to UCF because I knew good DBs. I didn't know the past history of great DBs, but I knew like Clayton Gathers and Jacoby Glenn the year before were really good players. That's one of the reasons I came here. And then you start looking at the years, every year we're turning up. I mean, Shaquille Griffin was just playing last night, and he's been in the league for 8 years now, which is crazy. I just think it's one of those things where we have always churned out good DB play. I think that has been a part of our defensive success is we have good DB play. And yeah, it's dropped off, but I don't think it's a talent issue. I think more so maximizing the players and getting the best out of them. A lot of these guys that were on that 2016, 2017 Frost team were on that 2015 horrible team, So it's not necessarily the player's talent. It's just sometimes it takes a different kind of guy to get it out of them. So I hope, with Coach Harris's background and his history and, understanding how to relate to these kids, which is huge, he can get the best out of it. And I think if we can do that, I think everything else comes down to everything else will trickle down defensively.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. Like you said, I mean, there was guys on the 15 roster that excelled, 2 years later. So
yeah, 3 years later. Yeah.
Right. So I don't think it was so much a talent issue. There might have been some, there might have been a little bit of a drop off in the DB talent compared to when we had like,
yeah, I mean, compared to the peak. Yeah.
And right. But there was,
but the play is so far like we had elite level play to go with that talent. Their talent might be a little drop off, but the play is so far beneath what their talent is, at least their ratings and what I've seen.
Correct.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And they've continued to restock that DB room every year with transfers and everything. And like just sheer quantity. It's not just, I mean, I know it's funny how many Frost has brought in this year, but I remember last year we were joking. I remember before the season, it was something like, I think there was 8 or 9 DB transfers last year. And it just, once again, I mean, there were some guys that, had some good years. Obviously, like I said, you had a couple of guys, Mac McWilliams and Brandon Adams, that got invited to the Reese Bowl. So clearly they have something going for them. And they had some, it wasn't like the secondary was god awful. It was below average or average at best. And, the talent was there, but I just think it never gelled, it never meshed. Obviously it was a new coach there. And then there was just a lot of just turnover in that secondary. But anyways, then the final coach that was hired on the defensive side of the ball is linebackers, Mark D'Onofrio, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this is another coaching veteran as well. Probably most known for his time at Miami and Temple, but he's been around. He's coached a lot of different positions. He's coached linebacker, tight end, special teams, but primarily he's coached inside linebackers. Really got his start at Virginia, was there a couple of years, then was at Temple for about 3 or 4 years, and then was at Miami, where he was actually the associate head coach as well as a defensive coordinator. That was probably his biggest role, biggest promotion, probably what he's most known for. Then he spent a couple of years at Houston, then Wisconsin, and then the last 2 years he was at Stanford. So, I mean, he's a guy that's moved around, but primarily been at Power, 4 schools for the entirety of his career outside of really Temple. So he's, this is one of those hires that kind of also got social media trashed, if you will. People didn't like it. I know the fan bases at Stanford and Wisconsin weren't exactly huge fans of him. But once again, you look at the numbers, a lot of the years he was pretty good. Obviously, the press releases that UCF puts out, they're not going to sit there and pinpoint negative stuff and try to talk about bad statistics. They're going to point out all of his best stuff. But overall, I mean, Stanford had a solid defense the last couple of years. Wisconsin's usually always, defensively sound. So, he's been, by all accounts, pretty good. I know he's had a little bit of a bad rap, but once again, a veteran. And look, we know if you ask any UCF fan that really follows what has been our worst position on either side of the ball for the past 5 years, everyone is going to say linebacker. So I don't think it can be much worse than it was. So I'm willing to give this guy a chance. I think everyone on Frost staff, in my mind, has a clean slate. I mean, regardless of their past, you would love to have the up and coming coach, the guy that every other program wants. But you know what? This guy at least has good experience, and I saw he's coached 20 linebackers over his career that have gone to the NFL, multiple All-Americans, and obviously all conference players. So I'm willing to see what do you know about this coach there, Trey?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know too much about him. It's more so you kind of look up the history where he's been in the past, and what has he coached, what has he produced. I think it's one of those things, like you said, 20 guys in the NFL. You've seen what an NFL player looks like. I think, to me, every coach should be able to say, I've seen what the best of the best in this conference and the best of the best, like an NFL guy looks like, so I can coach, try to get the most out of those guys. I can go recruit guys that I think have that shot. I think that's what's important. Talking about inside linebackers, to me, those when I played with it in this scheme, I don't know how much, Coach Grinch and Coach Chin's overlap. But the inside backers, the linebackers are the smart. They have to be smart. Because it's so much going on. There's so many stunts. There's so many blitzes. There's so many different types of things that you have to see in front of you. On top of that, there's different techniques you have to play. Are the guys in front of you taking on doubles? Are they, shooting gaps? It's so much that you have to know at that position than just, running just a run and hit guy, which there are a lot of really good those kind of linebackers too. Just for if there's any overlap, they have to be smart. So I think, like you said, every coach has a clean slate. I don't care if they were the worst coach. I know Coach Grinch got a lot of flack just because of his past with USC. But again, I don't think USC, when I watched them, I don't think they played sound. I don't think Coach Frost, I know for sure you're not playing if you don't play sound. So I don't know what Coach Riley was allowing over there, or if there were guys that, you have to play and they were just doing their own thing. So again, I think he has a clean slate. I don't know too much about, his techniques or what he's teaching. But I'm interested to see how these guys are. I'm glad Frost went and got guys with, like you said, 15, 20 plus years of experience mixed in with the young guys like McKenzie. I think this is his first big boy job. Brandon Harris, this is his, I wouldn't say first big boy job, but he's a younger guy with a bigger, a big time job. You're in a power forward defensive, a power forward DB coach. That's a big job. A power forward quarterback coach, it's a big job. So I think he has a healthy mix of some youth, some guys that he trusts and knows, and then some guys that he's bringing in that he might not be as familiar with, but they have the experience. He's not going to bring in guys that don't have that experience or haven't seen it. And I think that's the best thing you can ask for. Like you said, we're at UCF, man, and it's not to downplay it. We're not going to get the up-and-coming risers offensive coordinator, the up-and-coming rising defensive coordinator, because those guys are getting caught by the NFL teams. Those guys are getting caught by the Alabamas, the Georgia. That's just the reality of the situation. You have to be able to find those guys before they are. I think even going back to Danny White, Coach Frost was probably the last prime time up-and-coming guy because he came from Oregon, and that was the time of the spread offense guru. I think Coach Heupel was a good hire. I don't think he was that up-and-coming guy. I think Coach Malzahn definitely wasn't the up-and-coming guy. He was more of a retread. He was still a good coach. And then now Frost now. I think it's hard at UCF to do that, but I think if Coach Frost can maximize his staff, if he can get the right guys that can develop and buy in, I think they can get the best out of this group.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Roger put up on here, can you talk a little bit about how important inside linebacker is in a 3-4 defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the most important defenses. And it just depends on how they want to run it. I think the thing about defense now is 3-4, 4-3, whatever it is, because it's so much spread, it almost doesn't matter in a sense. I think up front the body types are different. That's probably really the only thing, is just the different body types. But I know for a fact you have to be smart. You can't just be a guy that's just give me one assignment. No, you have to make all your defensive linemen back. You have to be in constant communication with the safeties. You have to be able to tell the backers different things. So you have to be a smart football player. Some of those positions you just go out there like a corner, not to disrespect corners, because I think that's the hardest position in football. But you can just be like, hey, go lock up that receiver, take him out. Boom, that's easy. A linebacker, it's not that easy. Up through the middle at safety, it's not that easy. So you have to be the smart, you have to be a smart player up the middle. That's what I always say. The guys that play from the center of the football all the way up the middle, you have to be smart. I think that's the most important thing is at that position. Yeah, Frost is the third choice is crazy at the time. But, hey, third time's a charm, apparently.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, that's the overview of our coaching staff. It is completed now. We know who our guys are going into next season. Like we said, good mix of young guys, veteran guys that are part of Frost Circle, guys that are outside of Frost Circle. So let's see how it goes. Obviously, recruiting, at least on the transfer portal side, has been very, very strong over the past few weeks. And, it's obviously not just Frost, these position coaches that he's hiring have a hand in getting a lot of these guys to commit to UCF. So let's pivot to talking about those transfers. So on the show last week, we did talk about some of the guys that transferred over, which since that episode will not get released, we'll kind of rediscuss those guys again. So Trey, feel free to hop in whenever you like, but basically last week we signed 5 new guys, and then this past week we signed another 5. So we'll kind of go over those 10 new transfers that came over. So starting with wide receiver DJ Black, this is a guy that came over from Limestone, which is a D2 program. So that's the second D2 transfer that Frost has elected to take. So not afraid to kind of go down to the lower ranks and pull some guys up. But this is a guy that, started out his career as a South Carolina walk-on, really had no offers out of high school. So kind of just walked on to South Carolina, which is where he's from. He's a South Carolina native. And then, spent there, a redshirt freshman year there, and then ultimately decided to transfer and go over to Limestone. That his first year there, he did have some production, but last year was a breakout season for him. He had 41 catches, just under 1,000 yards, and had 11 touchdowns, which all led the team in all those receiving categories. So this is a guy also that, as of now, from what I'm seeing, looks like he'll be one of the taller, if not the tallest receiver on the team. He's 6'3", just under 200 pounds, and also going to be really the most experienced wide receiver on the roster. We talked about that last week, that's kind of one of the weaknesses you see on offense for UCF, which has been a little bit of a problem over, some recent years. But I've never seen it like this. Until DJ Black transferred over, there wasn't a single wide receiver on the roster that was an upperclassman. Every single one of them was either a redshirt freshman, or sophomore. I've never seen that in 15 years of watching UCF, where every single wide receiver is basically an underclassman. And on top of that, none of them essentially have seen any real field time. So it's not like you're talking about some freshman star that, played like a Gabe Davis when he was
or like a True Quan when Coach Frost got here. Like that's
exactly
completely different. Yeah.
Completely different. So none of these guys have seen the field. So we had to get some experienced receivers, because the first wide receiver transfer we got, Day Farmer, he played in, I think it was like 4 games last year. He had 6 catches for 59 yards. So he was not a guy that's seen the field that much either. So DJ Black, getting him, I think, was big. You talk about, his 3 years of experience, could obviously be a red zone target at 6'3", and was, really had a breakout season last year, at least relative to the rest of his career. So I think that was a big pickup for UCF. Obviously we'll see if his talent and skill set translates to the Power 4 level. But we've seen it in recent years, guys that have done really well, in the FCS or lower and come up and done really good, whether it's a guy like Bryson Armstrong, who was our leading tackler after transferring over from the FCS. You have Tylen Grable, who is now in the NFL playing for the Bills, and he was an FCS player. So you never know. So we'll see how DJ Black does. Next guy was Sincere Edwards. This is a guy, you probably remember his name. That's because he was the first commit of the 2024 class last year. There's a guy that was a Orlando Sentinels, Super 60 guy, ranked 3rd in all of Central Florida, one of the top guys in the entire Sunshine State, played at Waukeva High School. Very, very highly recruited out of high school, was a 4-star guy. That was a great way to start that 2024 class when we landed him, not only keeping, quote unquote hometown hero, but there's a guy who was getting recruited. He had offers from Ohio State, Michigan, you name it. There, pretty much every blue blood in the country was offering him. So that was a big pickup. And this is not a project. This is a guy that played significant time at Pittsburgh last year and was very, very productive. He was one of 2 freshmen on the entire team to play in all 12 games last year, all 12 regular season games. So there's a guy that was, from the start was very, very, very productive. Statistic wise, he had 17 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 pass breakups last year while playing in all 12 games. He's 6'1", 245 pounds. And like I said, was a top 75 guy in the state of Florida coming out of Waukeva. So, to get him a year later, after he's been in a college weight room for a year, was obviously very productive at Pitt. I think he comes in right away and is a starting edge rusher for UCF. Do you remember him from last year's class, Trey?
No, I don't remember him. Again, I'm kind of like Ben, where I'm just like, until they play a snap, and even then, sometimes I'm like, I don't really buy the try to get connected to him. Again, I'm sure he was a good player. I mean, to go play at Pittsburgh, which I know Pittsburgh isn't looked upon as like this high level place, but they put out a lot of NFL guys every year.
Aaron Donald.
yeah, specifically them. But so I know that that's a really good run program, and they play sound football over there. So for him to get out there as a true freshman and play significant
and be productive too,
so I think that speaks a lot. I think it could just be, he wants to get back home. I think that's one thing I noticed with a lot of these Florida kids is they don't really want to leave. I think they do sometimes, and some of them do. They pan out well, but I think a lot of them with Florida is special, man. So I think a lot of them try to get back. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a starter, off the rip too. The thing about Coach Frost is just he's going to play the best guy, whether the best guy is 17 years old or the best guy is 25 if we have any of those guys on the roster. He's going to play the best guy. So I think just going to DJ Black, I think he's going to be in to kind of be the leader of the room. I don't necessarily know if that translates to him being the number one guy, because he might just be out there to help these guys learn. That was, just being honest, that was kind of what my role was when I went to Nebraska. Yeah, I played, but it was more so to kind of teach these guys what Frost wanted and help them understand how to watch film and things like that. You just mentioned it. None of these guys have played significant minutes, and they can be the most talented people in the world. It is completely different playing college football than high school. It's completely different doing practice. I shouldn't say that, but because a few of my years at UCF, practice was harder than the game because of how good we were. But just it,
O'Leary.
Yeah. And I just think that it is different to get on the field playing other opponents that have game plans, you schemed, you know your strengths and know your weaknesses. I think DJ Black is a guy that can come help usher in some of these young guys as they go through the growing pains. Even Traquan, when he was a freshman and he was a stud, he had growing pains because just his game wasn't fully developed at 18, 19. So guys like at the time, Jordan Akins, guys like Rashad Perriman, Rennell Hall, JJ Wharton, they helped him a lot. Josh Reese. And then Traquan grows into that role as he gets older. Then that allows Gabe Davis to come in and help. I think that's what, Frost is trying to look for a little bit in some of those rooms that are young. Get some older vets in there who are still good players in their own right, but come in to teach them the ropes, man. Learn how to be a professional. That's what Frost wants all his guys to do, is learn how to be professionals, because he's going to treat you like one until you show him not to. He's going to let you do whatever you need to do. As long as you are doing what you're supposed to do, Coach Frost is so laid back. He doesn't care about your facial hair. He doesn't care about if you're, hanging out, doing whatever, as long as it's, legal and not illegal stuff, he'll let you do it. And that's how you want to be treated as, a young adult, a grown man. That's what you want to be treated as a young adult. So yeah, I think, Sincere Edwards will probably be a really good player. He's just gonna have to buy into how Frost is gonna do. Frost wants to do. You can't just come in and be like, hey, I played, I'm the most experienced, I'm coming to play. No, you have to buy into what they're gonna do. You have to be a leader as well. So
yeah, and relative to a lot of the transfers we got, Sincere Edwards is by far one of the best pickups just in terms of productivity. From last year at a Power 4 school. We got a lot of guys that have produced at previous stops. Some of them are G5, some of them are FCS, but he really produced at Pittsburgh. So I think it's a really big pickup, especially when you consider Dalen Dotson moved on, graduation. Ricky Barber obviously graduated, so we lose some big defensive linemen. Lee Hunter, I know those are more tackles than edge rushers, but Dalen Dotson was an edge rusher for us that we lost. So really the only primary edge rusher that was coming back, we only had a couple. So to bring in Sincere Edwards, I think is big for us. Yeah. So moving on, obviously the big news, I think, out of, the one that usually always gets the most notoriety, the most action, the most excitement is quarterback, right? Yeah. You knew this was coming when UCF picked up Cam Fancher from FAU. That felt like a depth play. It felt like a guy that, is going to be, sure, he may get a chance, but it's going to be, probably a third, second string guy. So you knew Frost was going to go get his guy. And apparently it's Taven Jackson. If you recognize that name? That is because this was a top 15 quarterback nationally in the 2022 class. He was a huge name. He had offers from Florida, Florida State, Michigan, Nebraska. So obviously Frost knew him and recruited him there. UCF even offered him out of high school. But he was a big name, top 15 quarterback in the country, and a top 200 player nationally by rivals, ESPN, On3. I mean, everyone had him as a really high-end recruit. So he comes from Indiana, and he was the number 7 recruit in the entire state in 2022. But he started out his career at Tennessee. And why is that important? Well, we all know Josh Heupel is there, and whether you like Josh Heupel or not, the guy knows quarterbacks. He's a former quarterback himself, and he's always, he knows quarterbacks. Whether it was recruiting Dylan Gabriel, whether it was recruiting Brock Purdy, which, he was considering UCF, and now he's obviously an NFL quarterback. This guy now at Tennessee, Hendon Hooker. I mean, he's had a lot of really big names at quarterback. He usually always has a great quarterback. So the fact that he was at Tennessee under hype gives me some confidence, but only spent there a year and redshirted that first year. Then he transferred over to his hometown, Indiana Hoosiers, where he did get a lot more playing time. He was generally the QB2, but his when he first transferred in, he was named the starting quarterback, but unfortunately that year he lost his starting role. But last year, before the season, he was named, basically the QB2. But Indiana's quarterback got injured last year, and Jackson came in and played 2, hell of games. He started one, and then he came in, like in the second or third quarter, whenever their quarterback got injured, and he won both of those games. So he went 1-0 as a starter, and then won the game that he came in the second half, and played some really good football for Indiana in those games. Yes, it was in a small sample size, but he guided them to 2 wins. Overall, had 350 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick last year, as well as 3 touchdowns on the ground. This is a guy that is very athletic. I haven't even talked about his size. That he's 6'4", 212 pounds. So he's kind of in that Blake Bortles mold. Yep. Definitely a real big guy. He's been compared to, he's a guy that is definitely mobile. There's no doubt about that. The kind of knock on him is he needs to work on his pocket passing and his pocket presence, but he can make plays happen with his feet when he's in trouble, and he can still sling the rock. It's just he hasn't shown a lot with his arm yet, but it's seemingly gotten better every year. With last year, obviously, when he came in for 2 huge games for Indiana and helped them win those games. Yep. So he comes to us, got 2 years of eligibility remaining, and it's interesting because obviously, first of all, it's quarterback, but UCF hasn't quite had stability at quarterback in a lot of recent years. It's felt like, and especially last year when you talk about starting 4 different quarterbacks. So we know that Dylan Risk is the incumbent, and we looks like he could, I'm very sure that he'll be in competition for that QB1 role, but clearly Taven Jackson was brought in to compete for that starting role. And, I think there's a propensity, for a guy like Frost, it's his own quarterback. I think there might be a little bit of an inherent bias there. So it feels to me that Taven Jackson would have the inside track unless, of course, Dylan just beats him out. And I think Frost as a fair guy and would give it to Dylan if that's the case. But Jackson comes in with a ton of potential. He's got the size, he's got some experience. He's played at 2 very good Power 4 programs. So this could be our guy next year. What do you think, Trey?
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of everything, I think if you look at football in 4-year intervals, I think we don't know who Frost 100% hand-picked guy is yet. I think that guy is, to be honest, I think he's probably a high schooler. Just my thoughts. But I think for 25 this season, I think this is who Frost would like to, if everything played out perfectly, this is who the offense will be built around. That's just my guess. I don't know if that's what he's thinking. I don't know if he's just trying to get more, talent in the room just to see, put all the talent out there and let's see how it fizzles out. I don't know if that's what he's doing. This is just my guess. I think this is what he wants. I think he wants the big mobile kind of guy who, he might struggle throwing a little bit, but Frost sees something in him. Mackenzie Milton struggled throwing a little bit early. Sometimes it takes time for guys to develop. I've seen it under Frost, guys develop. The problem that, in the past with Gus is I didn't ever see that quarterback fully develop over the years, mostly just because we were so run heavy and the offense was just, throw deep shots. I don't think we ever could get that maximization of the quarterback. Besides when we had guys like Mikey Keene, who that's what they do is just throw the football. I think Frost has done a lot better with developing the hyper athletic quarterback that is a lot more prevalent to run first, but he also can throw. I know the sample size of McKenzie, but even Adrian Martinez, when he was at Nebraska, yeah, he had his up and downs, but his first year he was pretty much a runner, and over the years he got better as a passer. I think that development helps being that Coach Frost played there. But I think Taven Jackson, I watched some of his highlight stuff or his high school stuff, and he's electric, to say the least. I think it's similar to Ja'Curry Brown in that sense of just body type athleticism. I didn't see him throw too much. Again, it's high school, but yeah, like you said, he came in those Indiana games and he played pretty well. I mean, Indiana was a playoff team this year, just so people know, and he came in and did his job well. So I think that's who Frost is in an ideal world would like to win out. I don't think that shuts the door on Dylan Risk because I just think he's a gamer in general. He throws extremely well. He doesn't have the arm as those guys, I don't think. But I think he's a little bit more accurate. He's a little bit more poised, and he can still do a little bit more stuff with his legs. So I ultimately think that's who Frost wants. But I think, like you said, if Dylan Risk wins the job, he's going to play. If Flancher shows he's the best guy, he's going to play. Now, how long is he going to play? He's going to only play as long as he produces. That's how Frost is. He's like, if you're not producing, I don't care. Yeah, you can win the job in camp. But if you don't produce in the games, I'm going to take you out and put in the guy. We saw that. I wouldn't say with Justin Holman, but he won the job in camp outright, and then he got hurt, but he wasn't performing to the highest standard, so it was easier to make that switch to McKenzie. So Tim in Florida again says that, what does the spring practice mainly encompass as far as competition goes? Really, at least the first year that I was there, Frost just wants to see, one, he wants to weed out the guys who don't want to compete. And it's not necessarily just getting positions because at the time, most of the time it was just the seniors. You just kind of go through that leadership. Seniors are going to be the ones that get the first shot, first crack out of respect. Or the upperclassmen whoever started. So in theory, Tim, Dylan Risk will probably start spring ball as the one. And it'll be his job to kind of lose. But Frost will mix in different combinations. He's going to mix in different O-line combination, different receiver combinations, running backs, quarterbacks, DB and Frost will be like, I want to see this person with the ones. I want to see these two guys with the one. That's what he did. The first year ended up being the starters, Drico, TJ Mutcherson, Shaquille, and DJ. I remember one time he legitimately was just like, I want to see the youngins at safety. And they was talking about me and Kyle Gibson. And we went in with the ones, and that was that. And we played well, but again, he wants to see the different combinations so that he can see if we're going to compete. Does our competition level go up with our competition, or do the lights get too bright? I think that's what spring practice mainly encompasses. It's not necessarily, a lot of install, which it is a lot of install just because it's football, but that's not what he's really ironing out. It's just breeding that competition level, setting the standard, setting the tone of how he wants the program to be. Because once you get in the fall camp, it's the season, realistically. We're installing stuff again for the freshmen, but we're trying to game plan for game one in the season and see who we're starting, how we're building this, the offense. So that's what I would say it is, Tim.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As it pertains to Jackson, again, just to finish up on him, it's obviously anytime you can get a former 4-star prospect that was, top 200 nationally that has some experience at Power 4 schools and still has 2 years of eligibility left, I think that's a win, at least for the competition standpoint. For sure. And, UCF lost 3 scholarship quarterbacks in the offseason between KJ and the other guys that transferred out, EJ Colson and Riley Trujillo. So they needed to get some, more bodies, but we'll see what happens. I think anytime there's a QB battle, it's always exciting. Anytime we've ever had it, from what I can remember, and, as you head into spring ball, you start get a little bit more news about what's going on. So I think Dylan versus Jakuri versus Jackson is going to be one of the, most watched position battles in all of spring ball. And everyone will be very, very eager, as we get into the summer and August before the season starts, who is going to be UCF's QB1. So that is definitely a battle to watch. At this point, I think it's wide open. It could be any of the those three guys I mentioned. Obviously, probably right now it feels like the two front runners are obviously Dylan and Jackson. But anything could happen. So we'll see what happens there. All right. Moving on to the next transfer, which was Lewis Carter, linebacker from Oklahoma. This is another former 4-star guy and another guy that was pretty productive, at Oklahoma. So another huge recruit out of high school, had offers from essentially every Power 4 program in the country. He's actually the second linebacker we've taken from Oklahoma in this transfer cycle. But this is a guy that came out of Tampa. So another Florida guy that's coming home, and, a guy that's going to be at UCF next season. A little bit about him. He played at Tampa Catholic. Say a very well-respected program in the Tampa area. He played there, was ranked as a top 40 prospect in the entire state of Florida in the 2023 class. The number 15 rated linebacker, and he was a top 170 recruit nationally. So like I said, 4-star guy that had offers from everyone. UCF also offered him out of high school, which obviously he did not commit there, but getting him a couple years later is big. We needed more linebackers. We know that's been a position of weakness for us. So I like some of these linebackers that Coach Frost is recruiting and is ultimately getting to commit through the portal. And a guy like Lewis Carter, that's a big pickup. He's 6'4", 225 pounds. His first year or two at Oklahoma was mostly playing on special teams, but last year he got his first really extended reps and extended minutes. He was still in a reserve role, but he did play a lot more actually on defense compared to just special teams. He had 21 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery last year. So definitely saw the field a lot more and produced when he did see that field. So, getting a guy like him with 2 years of eligibility remaining, a former 4-star, a guy that's been, at Oklahoma, who's obviously a great program, and to get him to come home, a Florida native, and get him in here, I think this is another guy like a Sincere Edwards that can really contribute immediately next year on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I watch his tape, and you want to talk about an explosive player. He plays defense the way you want. I don't know why he didn't play at Oklahoma. It could be any reason, I don't.
He started to though.
Yeah, and I think that's just could be development. I mean, guys don't play for whatever crazy reasons, and sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it just doesn't click. Sometimes. You just make mistakes and you get one shot. I don't think that's how you should treat a guy, but the talent is there. He's a perfect run hit, physical football player. He's athletic. He's big. He's strong. He's fast. So I think that, that's what just from watching his highlights, he's going to play. I think this is when I look at all the years, dealing with Coach Frost and the type of guys he likes to play, this is the type of guy, the mold that he wants his guys. It's the Mark Ruckers who, I know Ruck wasn't the biggest guy, but he was a run hit specialist. Shaquem Griffin, run and hit special. Those guys are just athletic and can run, and they just play football with the right intensity, the right fire lit up, beneath them that you want. So I'm super, super excited to see him play. I hope that he could, obviously I want him to stay healthy, and I hope that he can grasp the playbook. Because if he's playing inside backer, that's what I think is the holdup for most of the athletic guys, is just understanding the responsibilities. You can't just always play super fast. You have to be, start to play smart as well. So I think that's what I'm excited about him. Roger says, will there be more portal guys because Frost will try to get rid of those who won't compete? It doesn't even necessarily be Gus Coddled. I think he's going to get rid of. If Flancher doesn't want to come in ready to compete, he's going to get rid of him. If we're talking about the linebacker, if he comes in not ready to compete, he's going to want to get rid of him. Frost he's just a competitive guy by nature. he talked about in his press conference, after every single practice, just about, he's either out there running or he would go play pickup at the rec gym because he just liked to compete. He said he's going to slow down a little bit with that, but I think that's just something that is just in him. It oozes at him. He wants to see how guys are when they're faced with adversity. He wants to see how guys are when they're faced with, there's a guy that's just as good as you. How are you going to respond? Because that's what football is how you respond mostly. If you go up against somebody and they beat you a rep, do you shut it down the rest of the game because you got beat, or do you try to win every other rep after that, or you have short temper? So I think that's what Frost is going to do. I don't necessarily know if it'll be – I mean, actually, probably the only way to replace him would be portal guys now, because the portal's just – I mean, there's a second portal, if I'm not mistaken, right? Whereas
there's a second window that opens up in the spring. They're talking about revising it to just being one 10-day window. The coaches voted on something I saw today or yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as of now, correct. There will be another window that opens up in the spring. So you're going to see some of these 27 transfers we've gotten so far. You'll see some of those guys leave, and you'll see some guys that were already on the roster from last year that are going to leave. That's just what happens after the spring game. They get more tape. They see that maybe they're not going to play or whatever the case may be. We saw it last year. There was, I think, 2 or 3 guys that transferred in this the fall cycle and then ended up leaving in the spring.
Yeah, and even the guys that when Coach Malzahn left and then they get into the portal and they come back, don't be surprised if you see those guys back in there. I think it's good for both parties. I think it's good for Frost to see, I want to, before these guys leave, let me get my eyes on them to see if they've been shorted or they're just good football players or if they're not good football players. And I think the same thing with the guys that jumped in, like, hey, I'm coming back. Let me see if Coach Frost is, can maximize my abilities. If not, I'm going to get back in, and that's going to go on across the entire country. So, like, the roster's not set. Like, I know we're getting these numbers up and getting it, like, anxious, but, like, the roster's not set. I don't even think we're going to have these quarterbacks. Like, Dylan Risk, Ja'Curry Brown, Cam Flancher, and then what's the kid from Indiana? The kid from Indiana. I forgot his name already.
Taven Jackson.
Yeah, Taven. Yeah. All 4 of those guys aren't going to be on the roster. It's not – it wouldn't make sense for them to be, just realistically, because
I agree.
Flancher, I think he might be here just like you said. I think he's a depth piece that's reliable. I don't see why, if Dylan Risk thinks he has no shot at the job, why he would stay. I see same thing.
And he got paid.
Brown. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't see a reason why Ja'Curry Brown, if he's getting third team reps, fourth team reps, why would he stay? He's a talented guy, but I don't see that situation. And even like you talk about, like, the DB room, like, we have probably 20 DBs, maybe 25,
17, something crazy.
Yeah, you can only realistically play 4, 5 max at once, and then you get the 2 deep. So you're talking 6, 7 guys who
never going to see the field.
I wouldn't get too settled on the roster just as a fan, because after the spring and throughout spring, they're going to understand where they fall. Some of these high school guys that are signed that aren't going to be there, you have to factor in them as well. And then, that when that second portal opens, that's going to be the whole thing. I think it's hard to kind of attach that guy because you don't know what's going to happen in the spring.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. The roster is not set, but it's starting to come together. I mean, more and more,
Exactly.
We're getting more and more players, 27 transfers, considering all that we lost from last season between graduation and transfers, it is nice to start, getting, seeing at least some of these guys. Yeah, fill it out. So the final guy from last week that, we covered, but obviously, so it won't come out, is Carter Miller, offensive lineman. This is the 5th offensive lineman transfer. So obviously Coach Frost is putting a precedence on getting offensive linemen here. We needed it. There was a ton of offensive lineman defections after this season. So Carter Miller, former 3-star guy. This is a guy, he was, I would say, somewhat under-recruited. He only had 9 offers out of high school, not a single Power 4 offer. They're all, G4, G5 offers. Guy that played out of Brentwood, Tennessee, started out his career at James Madison. And got significant playing time at James Madison. He, his last year there, he played 11 games and started 8 of them at left guard. So definitely got some playing time. And then he ended up transferring after 2 years at James Madison, transferred to Louisiana Monroe, which is where he spent this last season. And he started all 12 games at center. And why that's important is that was UCF's biggest need by far on offensive line. They did not have a center. Obviously, Caden Kittler transferred out. At this point, the only true center on the roster is Walt Claire Flynn Jr., and he hasn't seen a single snap of college football. So they needed a center to come in, and this is a guy that started just 12 games last year at center. So this is a big pickup for UCF. Someone that's experienced, someone that was productive. He was an all Sun Belt honorable mention, so definitely had some accolades. A guy that is well respected and played some good football. Overall, he had a 76.7 pass blocker grade on PFF, so had some good grades last year. He's 6'2", 300 pounds, so big boy. That's all 5 of UCF's O-line transfers have all been at least 300 pounds and at least, I think, 6'2". So there's getting some size there. And this is a guy that, played a lot of football over the past 3 years. So I think this was definitely one of our bigger pickups, one of our biggest remaining needs. I think we probably could still use a couple more offensive linemen, but center was by far one of the biggest needs. And to, get a guy that started 12 games last year at the position is a big pickup for UCF. So that really concludes the transfers from last week, but UCF was able to land another 4 transfers this week. So over the past, call it 3 weeks since the transfer portal has opened, UCF is clearly focused on offensive linemen and DBs. And you're kind of wondering, where's the skill position players? And there was a few. Obviously, we got a tight end. We had DJ Black, a wide receiver. We got a quarterback, obviously. But you were wondering, where's, we know Frost, and, he loves his skill players. And now it became something that was, really went hand in hand with that 2017 era, was just all the great skill players we had. So that the last 3 out of the last 4 transfers have been skill position players from this week. So starting out is running back Jaden Nixon. Running back was the only position on offense or defense that we hadn't landed at least 1 transfer yet. So you knew that was coming, especially with RJ Harvey graduating, Johnny Richardson graduating. We talked about a little earlier when we were talking about the, Jimmy Beal. But really, the only running back in the room with any experience is Miles Montgomery. And let's be honest, he has an injury history. So between Tavion Swint, Miles Montgomery, and Stacey Gage, that's really the only running backs we had, just 3. So to bring in Nixon, I think was a really big pickup. And this is talk about a guy that produced absolutely. So he started his career out at Oklahoma State, but he was very talented. But he had the unfortunate standing of being behind Ollie Gordon, who we know has been one of the best running backs in the Big 12, if not the nation, over the past couple of years. So he never saw the field, kind of similar how we saw at UCF with RJ Harvey. When you have a guy that dominates that many snaps and gets that many carries, it makes it hard for other running backs. So Nixon, still played a little bit at Oklahoma State, had a few touchdowns while he was there, 500 yards and 2 TDs over 3 years. But what he did was last year he did transferred to Western Michigan and had an absolutely breakout year. Had 919 yards on 6.4 yards per carry and 12 touchdowns, and was ultimately named first team All MAC last year. So absolute breakout year when he finally saw the field. He had 5 games with over 100 yards and 4 games with at least 2 TDs. So he had a great year. And out of high school, he was a pretty big recruit as well. 3-star guy in the 2021 class. Came out of Texas, actually out of Frisco. And, obviously Texas has some great players, and he was a top 150 guy in Texas, top 70 running back, and, 969 nationally. So pretty well recruited, had some pretty good offers, mostly from Texas and Oklahoma schools, but obviously went to Oklahoma State, where he didn't get to see the field too much, but had an excellent year last year, 5'10", 185 pounds. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Penny Boone. Maybe obviously not as weight wise, not the same, but I don't know. I could see him kind of being in that sort of role. Or who knows? I mean, he could be our starting running back. I think running back, unlike the last 2 years, is a wide open position with RJ Harvey gone. Sure, Miles Montgomery is the most experienced and as of now is the only guy we've seen and looks to be the most talented and had a lot of good games last year, but between his injury history and just a little bit of the unknown in the running back room, who's to say Jaden Nixon couldn't be our starting guy after coming off the year that he had last year?
Yeah, I mean, Texas is a lot like Florida. I know he ended up at Oklahoma State, but Texas is a lot like Florida in the sense they might not be rated highly in the state. Like, I mean, being top 150, if you're the 120th best player in Texas, you're better than a lot of the football players in the country. You know, like I think that's the same thing in Florida. Like 120th best football player in the state of Florida is a really, really good football player. You know, I think it's just so saturated in those states. So again, he's a good football player, like you said, behind Ollie Gordon, who NFL player. It's going to be hard to kind of dethrone him or steal snaps away. And then he goes to Western Michigan and he puts it together and shows that he's a great player. You know, I think what Frost is doing with a lot of this is he's just trying to get as much talent on the roster as possible and just let it shake out. You know, I think that's the best way to do it when you're just because I wouldn't say he got into it late, but just he got into it after signing day. He got into it after that kind of portal thing. It's hard to build out a roster. So he's like, let me just take a whole bunch of talented players, put them all in the box and see what comes out of it. You know, I think that's what you have to do. And I think, again, Jaden Nixon, I wouldn't be surprised if he was our starting, like you said, our starting running back going in the year. But again, the history of Frost is he's going to utilize his best guys. You know, if his four best players are running backs, you can believe he's going to utilize all four of his best running backs. You know, that's just how he is. So I think, you know, Jaden Nixon is a good player. I think we have some really good, talented young guys. I think he's going to be that experienced guy, kind of like I was talking about earlier, that you got to go in and set the tone, show these guys. Like, yeah, RJ Harvey's gone, but they still need to know how to do it under Coach Frost. And a lot of the time, the veteran guys are the ones that can help with that transition period. So I'm excited. I'm excited about him. I think he's a good player. He's a track guy. To me, it's like, again, you run track, you play in a big-time state, which is like Texas, Florida, Georgia. You know, those two things, you already have my attention as a player. And he's produced already in college, so I'm excited about him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that was a big pickup. We obviously need another running back. I mean, I typically on this roster, we're used to seeing usually 5 scholarship backs. And I would say, you know, I guess a little bit less during the Malzahn era, but we're usually used to seeing at least 2, if not 3 guys that are very, very productive. I mean, that's why I think, you know, you saw during the Frost era and a little bit in the Heupel area where there wasn't a lot of guys that were having 1,000-yard seasons because you had like 3 or 4 guys that were having 500+ yards.
Yeah.
So that very well could happen again with some of the talent we have in the running back room. I'm definitely not worried about talent at all in running back. That's been a position that's been very, very stable for UCF for a while now. It's just, there's just not a lot of experience there, but I don't see why.
That's probably talent-wise, the most stable. I mean, just from all of the coaching changes, like just throughout all of it. Yeah. Like I think it's always Heupel had good running backs. Frost had good running backs. Coach Malzahn had good running backs. Coach O'Leary even had good running back. You know, like I think that's just probably the most stable position throughout every time. And I think adding him is good.
At least on offense. And I think the whole team. Yeah, I haven't worried about running backs since probably 2015 when that winless season when we had there was Taj McGowan was on the team, but other than that, it was pretty, I can't remember.
It was supposed to be stand back. Remember, like that was stand back after 2014 where he was kind of splitting with
but then he ended up leaving though.
But then he ended up leaving. So that's what that's the only reason. Like if we would have had stand back and then like a Taj and then Don Travis to kind of supplement, the running back room was great. It's just when he kind of dropped off, that's where it became a question mark. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
100%. So next, I mentioned we were picking up skill position players. We landed our second tight end. This is Elijah Brown, who transfers over from FAU, actually the third FAU transfer of this cycle. So interesting, but he started out his career at Alabama, was recruited by Nick Saban, another, big time high school recruit, was a 4-star guy in high school and is still considered a 3-star transfer as well. So he is, I think, well regarded just for his, that he's a prospect. He's a guy with a lot of potential. He's 6'6", 250 pounds. So it's a big tight end. He's from Dayton, Ohio. Went to Wayne High School. Shout out. That's where my mom went to high school. So every time I see Wayne, I always kind of have to note that. But funny, he's number 12 rated prospect in all of Ohio, top 15 tight end nationally, and was a top 300 recruit nationally. So he also had the pick of his litter for, he got offers from Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, LSU, Michigan State, Nebraska. Penn State. So, I mean, he was really, really highly recruited out of high school, where he was a 4-star guy. Interesting, it is the UCF second tight end of the cycle. He joins Dylan Wade, who was very productive last year. Elijah Brown definitely seems like a prospect, a project, a guy that we're going to have to develop. I mean, he has been in college football for a couple of years now, but he has his entire career just has one catch for 22 yards. I mean, he obviously was used as a blocker a lot, but I don't see a guy like him kind of coming in and being up the primary pass catching tight end when you have guys like Kylan Fox and now with Wade here too. Seems like maybe a depth play or someone that we could develop. But obviously, if you get recruited by Nick Saban at Alabama, there must be something there. So be interesting to see what he does. If he ends up playing or he's just more of kind of a blocker. But, I haven't seen too many transfer cycles where we've gotten 2 tight ends. Obviously we lost Randy Pittman. That was a big one. And then we had Reese Adkins graduate. So the room did get a little thinner. It still had Kylan Fox and Grant Stevens. And now with Dylan Wade and Elijah Brown, we're up to 4 tight ends again. So definitely there's some depth there. And also Jordan Davis graduated too. So yeah, we lost a few pieces at tight end, but we were able to kind of restock there. So we'll see if Elijah Brown can turn into anything. But I think tight end, once again, I feel pretty good about it. Between Kylan Fox and Wade, I would have felt a lot better if it was Randy Pittman, but I think Kylan Fox has a lot of potential.
Oh yeah,
and Wade produced last year a lot. So this feels like a depth play, though.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, anybody that's getting recruited by Nick Saban, I trust his evaluation of talent over a lot of people in this world. Yeah. Probably most people in this world. So I think the talent's probably there. Like I said, it could be a multitude of reasons of why he didn't. He only has 1 catch. It could be he's just playing behind really good guys. I know for a fact at Alabama that could be the reason.
Sure.
But yeah, I think Frost just again I feel like he's just trying to get talented players, and let it shake out, because that's ultimately what competition breeds. It's going to breed the best out of you, and it's going to weed out the guys who don't want it. I've told you, Kylan Fox. I think the sky's the limit for him. I see like a baby Jordan Akins type. Like Akins started out a receiver, and then it's just like, all right, like your mismatch. What you're going to be great at is at tight end. I think that's Kylan Fox. Like, yeah, he needs to put on a little bit more physical weight than Akins did, obviously, because Akins came from baseball. But, like, Kylan Fox is going to be a mismatch. When it clicks, I don't know. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But I think Elijah Brown could be in that same mold. I think that's what Nick Saban saw. I don't think he was the immediate guy. And I think Dylan Wade is a really good player. So I think Frost is just going to get guys with that pedigree of recruiting of, highly recruited guy, at least at the skill positions. He wants it to shake out. I think when you're starting to get to like the O-line and things like that, he wants experience, because he understands, like, yeah, you can be talented on the line, but if you don't know what you're doing, if you can't communicate, if you haven't seen those reps, it's a lot harder to break the lineup as a true freshman than over a guy that is experienced in that area. So I think that's what he's kind of doing. I think, the trenches, he's trying to get some guys with experience, with actual stats to kind of and starts to back it up. And then, at the skill positions, we're going to be a young team. He knows that. So, like, why not go get young talent and see how it shakes out as far as that, and see what we can get out of it. So I'm excited. I'm excited about a lot of these players.
Me too. No, me too.
Just from their recruiting pedigree. And I know we shouldn't buy into a lot of it. But again, like you said, if Nick Saban wanted you and allowed you to sign the dotted paper to come play at Alabama, there's something in your game that is Alabama worthy. It has that pedigree. So it's just a matter of getting it out of you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next up, we talked about how, UCF essentially had no experience in the wide receiver room until DJ Black transferred over. Well, we went and landed another guy with a lot of experience, former Florida Gator, Marcus Burke. This is a guy that, 4-star guy out of high school, had a ton of offers, was top 30 in the Sunshine State, number 33 ranked wide receiver, and he was top 185 nationally. So big time recruit, had offers from Auburn, Florida, FSU, Georgia, pretty much all the schools in the South, Texas. Big guy, 6'4", 200 pounds. That's the type of size I haven't seen at UCF receivers in a while. The Gabe Davises and the Traycons, these taller guys, these red zone targets. So Marcus Burke is a guy. He's been at Florida now for 4 years. Stayed there through entire, coaching change to Napier, and didn't see a lot of play time until this past year. He finally saw the field. Coach Napier said in the offseason, I read a quote about, he was talking about him. He said he felt out of really on all of the offense, he felt Marcus Burke had made the most strides, and he had really expected him to be a major player for the Gators this year. It didn't quite translate to that this year, but he still did end up playing more than at any other point in his career. Last year, he did have 2 touchdown catches, only 7 catches on the year, but did have 2 TDs and played in 11 out of 12 games. So he did see the field. He was more of like their wide receiver 3 type of guy. But I think, a guy that has 4 years of experience at Florida did see some playing time. That's a big pickup, someone we needed, even if it is just kind of like Trey, how you said, he may just come in to kind of mentor these guys. Well, UCF needs it because the other receivers on the roster are freshmen or redshirt freshmen. So, a guy like Marcus is needed. He played at Trinity Christian Academy. They're 9-time state champs out of Jacksonville. Yeah. UCF has gotten some really good players out of Jacksonville, whether it's Jordan Johnson or Otis Anderson. Trinity Christian is a great program. And he was a 4-star guy out of there. So I think it's a good pickup. I don't know if it's a guy that will start. Maybe he will. Once again, wide receiver room, I think is wide open. There's a lot of guys that could, play. Could be a mixture of the younger guys and a guy like Burke and DJ Black. But, he has 1 year of eligibility remaining. So let's hope he has a killer year at UCF. We've seen guys like Brandon Johnson who transferred in for his grad year from Tennessee and had a great year with, I think, 11 touchdown catches. So, and now he's in the
NFL career too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. He's been in the NFL now for about 3-4 years. So, so we'll see. But Marcus, I think that's a big pickup. I think UCF could still use probably even 1 more wide receiver, but now we're up to 3 between him, Black, and Day Farmer. So that wide receiver room starting to fill out, and I think Marcus Burke is a real strong addition there.
Yeah, I asked because I know a guy that works at the University of Florida. So we had like a little friendly bet when we played, and I lost it. But yeah, I asked him. I was like, "Tell me about him," and he was just saying he's very talented. He's probably should have been their best receiver, but it's hard to put it together. And that's what I always say, like so many different circumstances. Like we talk about the 2017 season and like it was the perfect storm. You can apply that to every player that's ever played. Like some of these guys that are elite players that we look at and like at the history, like Traquan and RJ Harvey, like so much stuff had to go right for them to get that maximization. And there's a lot of guys that I played with that we don't talk about as much, but they were super talented guys. It just didn't 100% unfold that way. I think that's just what happens with a lot of these guys. I think it's hard to be great. I think it's hard to do those things to be great consistently. You can show flashes all you want, but it's hard to do it over and over and practice and rep in the game and every single week. So it could be a lot of reasons to why he wasn't, but the talent's there. And that's from somebody that works within him saying, hey, he's probably the most talented receiver on our roster the last few years. And that's with a guy who just went in the first round with Ricky Pearsall last year. So sure. I think the talent's there. It's just for whatever reason, he didn't put it together. I think that happens a lot. So hopefully we get the best version of Marcus Burke at UCF. That way we can see it unfold.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see how the wide receiver room shakes out. I'm really excited about the younger guys like Jordan Bridgewater and Burdell Richardson and
the guys that
Casey
we've been
Stokes
talking about from their great spring balls, and then we never see them again. I'm excited to see them actually play.
Yeah, now they'll get a chance. They will under Frost, like you've said a bunch of times now.
For sure.
So the final, all right, this transfer will bring us up to completely caught up, the 27th transfer of the cycle, linebacker Cole Kozlowski. This is the 4th linebacker transfer. So after DB and O-line, it is, that is the most position we've taken as far as in the portal would be linebacker after those 2 positions. So clearly a point of emphasis. This is another FCS guy, second FCS guy. So, Frost he's got 4 between FCS and D2, there's 4 players that come from those ranks. So he's definitely not afraid to pluck from there. Kozlowski played at Colgate the last 4 years. And really was very, very productive. I mean, his career started out a little bit slow, didn't get a ton of playing time, but last year was his breakout year. He had 133 tackles led the team, 8 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and ended up being first team All-Patriot. So absolute breakout year for him as a senior, which is interesting. Maybe I don't obviously know much about Colgate football, but maybe he was sitting behind some talented guys, or he had some injuries. I'm not quite sure, but 6'2", 230 pounds overall, while at Colgate, played in 32 games. And at career finished his career there with 201 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 picks, and 2 forced fumbles. And you could see what $133 out of those 201 tackles came last year in a single season. So he had an excellent year last year. Obviously, was all conference. Overall becomes the 14th defensive transfer. He'll have 1 year of eligibility remaining. So this kind of reminds me of some similar things we've done in the past, whether it was Bryson Armstrong coming in for 1 year, or a guy like Jason Johnson, who was here for 2 years, just kind of coming from the FCS. And UCF's had some success with the FCS linebackers recently, so I don't see why this guy couldn't come in and play. I'd like to see some more speed at linebacker. Felt like Ethan Barr was kind of slow, but I haven't really seen Kozlowski's tape, but it seems like a good pickup.
Yeah, I think he's going to fill that experienced veteran role. Ethan Barr, like you said, probably a smart football player. I mean, he's at Colgate. That's a very smart school. So I think that's what it's going to be. I think it's some of those guys, like I said, it's one of those guys that he's probably going to come in, do everything right, set the tone for the room, set the tone possibly for the defense, just to get everybody marching in the same direction. I think it's hard for a young guy to take that role. I think it's hard when you have a new coach, especially for that to happen, no matter how talented they are. So I think he's going to be one of those guys that he's going to come in the weight room, work hard. Coach Duval's going to kill him. He's going to let him kill him and set the example. He's going to throw up, but he's going to keep going, and I think that sets the tone for the kind of guys you want. So he might not be that high-level football player. Like, I don't think Ethan Barr was the best player on our team, but I think he was kind of the glue that get everybody lined up, do what his job is right most of the time. But, like, when you watch him, it wasn't like, wow, Ethan Barr is just a crazy, amazing football player. No, I think his job was to get people lined up and make sure everybody's marching in the same direction. I think that's what possibly could be. I could be completely wrong. I don't know enough. I haven't seen him. I'm just assuming that's why they brought him in. Just like that's what I assume that he's bringing in all these veterans for, is to get some seniors, some leadership in that room, guys who've played a lot of snaps, played college football, and kind of get them in the direction. And then, I tell people that 2016 season, we started off very top heavy in the sense of older guys, but as the season went, the younger guys get more comfortable in the offense, and they are clearly the more talented guys, and they start to play, and that's just the way it is. Even when we were, figuratively competing for the conference, they were still starting to play. It made it a lot easier when when we lost to Tulsa. So I think it was like week 9. I think it just made it easier because we couldn't win the conference. It's so much easier to be like, all right, we're going to youth movement. So I think that's what Frost is kind of going to do. And even when I was at Nebraska, that's what he did. We started like 0-6. Once we started, 2-6, 2-7, we started getting weeded out for the young guys because our seasons, they're looking to the future, and it sucks because, we care about our seniors and we care how much they pour into the program, whether it be 4 or 5 years or even just the year they come for their last year. But that's just the business. It's always, what are you going to do for me next? What can you do for me next when you can't do anything else? So I think that's what you're going to see from a lot of these guys is, as long as they're producing, they're going to play, but there's going to be always that pivot point from when these young guys start to flash and it starts to click. Frost will have no problem putting them in. They might not play all game, but they're going to start playing because he's looking, like he's always said, he wants to build it right. And it's not going to be 13-0 year 1, year 2, maybe not even year 3. But if you build it right, it'll be sustainable, So I think that's what some of these guys are going to be in here for. And I think they're going to be able to look back 3-4 years and be like, hey, I played my part in that. And it's awesome that I was able to do that.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You want that stability, which is what we're hoping Frost will bring us. Yeah. So final bit of transfer news before we move on. Kelly Lawson, who was, I think, the first linebacker transfer that came in, if you may or may not know this, people are listening, but in order for a transfer to kind of be official, they have to enroll in classes. So if they haven't enrolled, they could announce on social media that they committed to UCF forever. Does not mean does not mean that they're actually a Knight yet. So Kelly Lawson committed to UCF on December 24th. And this was a guy I was excited about. I thought was one of the more productive guys, played a big role at Virginia Tech last year. But then it comes out, I think a week ago, that he is, his recruitment is back open. He is reopening his recruitment and is looking at other schools. And then it comes out a couple of days after that he actually did sign at UCF. So if you followed that, Kelly Lawson is officially a Knight. He enrolled and he signed. So just the crazy world that we live in the transfer portal, where, the word committed does not really, that actually word has no meaning anymore. It's just like saying, okay, I'm interested in going to that school is essentially what it means. But he's in the building and he's there. So that brings UCF up to 27 overall transfers. I would assume probably done for right now, or maybe a couple more before spring. But 27, 13 on offense, 14 on defense. As I mentioned, O-line, DB, and linebacker were the top three positions taken. Overall, 16 have come from the Power 4, 7 from the G5, 2 from FCS, and 2 from the D2 ranks. And then Florida is the most common state, the hometowns of these transfers, with 10 out of the 27 coming from Florida. And then there's a few New Jersey, Georgia, Virginia, and then a couple other states that are scattered. So that kind of concludes the transfer portal news. So I guess we can pivot now, as Roger likes to say. So a little bit of other UCF news. Now this is kind of old, but since our podcast got deleted and we want to address it, Chasen Johnson is coming back after initially entering the portal, committing to USC, and then pivoting and committing to SMU. Kind of just like what I talked about with Lawson, doesn't matter until you enroll. He announced he's coming back to UCF. So that's a big one. That was out of all the freshmen that played last year, which, as we know, there wasn't many. There was, maybe 2 or 3. Chasen, I think, was the one that played by far the most, and actually played not just on special teams. He played at DB. So getting him back, I think, is awesome. He was, a guy that was a pretty big high school recruit. And, when you didn't hear, actually, he was one of the ones you didn't hear about in the spring. There was a lot of other DBs that you were hearing about, but Chasen is the one that did produce the most on the field. So getting him back, a guy that still has, is only giving a sophomore with 3 years of eligibility, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the guys that, in a season where I didn't really like a lot of what I saw, I liked what I saw in the little bit that he showed. Reminded me a lot. I wouldn't say exactly of Braden Marshall, but like just kind of how like Braden Marshall flashed as a true freshman. I was like, wow, like he's gonna be a good player. I think I saw that with Chasen Johnson. So when I saw him enter, I was like, Frost has to try to keep him. And then I was like, okay, he's going to SMU. Might be a money play because that's probably what it is. But for him to come back, I think it's big. Ultimately, again, you got to prove it. It's a prove it league. You got to show you're better. They know you're good because Frost wouldn't have tried to keep you in. I think they understand that. But I think it was a good thing to keep him to kind of round out that group. I think, like I said, I think that group is very talented. It's a matter of maximizing and getting all the juice out of that, the oranges in those rooms. I think that's what we've struggled with in the past. And I think that's what, if we can get the best out of him, he's going to be really good. I think if we can get the best out of a lot of those guys, they're going to be really good football players. So I'm excited that he came back for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's no shortage of quantity now in the DB room. It's just who's going to end up being the guys that, produce. I mean, we got 7 DB transfers. Chasen Johnson's coming back. And then I think we landed 3 or 4 DBs in the high school class. So there's a lot of names and a lot of numbers in there, but we'll see who ends up. Obviously you had guys like Mac McWilliams and Brandon Adams and quite a few DBs that moved on and a couple that transferred. So we did need to restock that room, but there is definitely no shortage of talent or no shortage of names in there now between all the new guys we got. So, but getting Chasen back is great, like you said, Trey. So that pretty much concludes UCF football news. We'll go into basketball. I know we're not, Trey and I aren't exactly the basketball guys. Yeah, as much as Ben or Roger, but we can do at least a little recap. If you're up this late and you're a UCF fan, you probably know that UCF basketball is playing right now as we speak. And since we're live, I can say that because this isn't coming out in a few days. UCF is up 21-20 right now in the first half against Arizona State in Tempe on the road. Obviously, that's why they're playing so late here, Eastern time. we'll get into that in a second. But really over the last couple weeks, what we saw, the big win against Texas Tech in the conference opener in Lubbock. They won 87-83. Darius Johnson had a big game in that one, hit 70% of his shots, 24 points. Keyshawn Hall had another great game, 22-8, was 4 for 4 from beyond the arc. So that was a big win. Then we talked about this extensively. I'm sure they talked to us on the Hoops podcast. So we're not really going to, restart this, but, UCF got absolutely demolished by Kansas, lost by 51, which was a program record. As far as the losing margin, it was, just an absolute destruction that we got routed 99-48. Really not much to say about there. I mean, we shot horribly. We got out rebounded, big on the offensive glass, and Kansas won the point in the paint battle 62-10.
Yeah.
So we just got outsized, outman. I mean, at the end of the day, Kansas is as blue blood as it gets, and they're top 10 in the country for a reason. So we were not able to repeat last year's magic when we beat them. But, Ben had mentioned on the podcast that he wanted to see how UCF would respond. It was this 51-point loss a sign of things to come, that we're not going to be able to compete? We're nowhere near competing, or is it going to be, just kind of an aberration? It was a 1-game sample. Look, chalk it up to a bad game against a very good team. And by all accounts, that, seems like what it was. We came back after that game and beat Colorado. It was a nail biter, a thriller. I was watching that game. Came down, UCF was down at halftime. They were down really for most of the game until I think it was like 8 minutes to go. They took a small lead, and then Colorado and UCF were just battling back and forth for the final 5 minutes or so. But UCF ended up winning 75-74. Defense came up huge at the end. If you guys watched that game, Jordan Ivy Curry had 22 and 6. Keyshawn had 18 and 7. Darius Johnson had 17 and 5. It's funny. I mean, UCF got out rebounded in that game. Colorado shot better from the field and from three. But UCF won the turnover battle big, 22-12, and produced a lot of points off of those 22 turnovers that Colorado had. So, big win to get to 2-1 in the conference. And then the most recent game before tonight was against Arizona, which UCF unfortunately did lose. It was on the road. This is, UCF before the game, they were a 16.5-point underdog, and they only lost by 8. They were competitive. I mean, it never felt like they ever had control, and they didn't really have lead at any point in the game, but they never let it fully get out of control. And they ended up battling till the end and only lost by 8, which I think is fine. I mean, Arizona, Blue Bud, I know they had a little bit of a rough start in non-conference play, but they're 4-0 right now in Grade 12.
Yep.
What was that?
They're heating up right now, which is,
yeah.
I mean, at the time you want to heat up in the, in the conference play. And that's what they're doing right now.
100%. That's exactly what they're doing. And so, it's not a surprise. I mean, when you're 16.5 point dog, that would have been a huge upset if we would have won. So, on the road like that was going to be tough. But overall, Keyshawn Hall, 20, he's been on fire, as Roger said. I mean, he had 22 points, 6 boards, 5 assists. Darius had 18 points and 5 boards. Chiam had 8 points and 10 rebounds. Mikey Williams, though, had a season high with 9 points in that game. Overall. So it was nice to kind of see, him get more involved and him have a pretty solid game after, he's, obviously getting back into it after the injury, missed pretty much all of non-conference play, and hasn't produced too much. So he had 9.
And Ben even talked about it. I know during the game, he was just like, he's impressed him a lot. Like, I think out of all those games, these past few games, he's like, Mikey is coming along, and like, he's starting to see the talent as far as this, he was a 5-star for a reason. It's starting to show. It's taking him some time to kind of get into the flow of things, get back into whatever it is, but I think the talent is shown. He gets after it on defense. He's a good player. And I think down the stretch, we're going to start seeing a little bit more of that. The Kansas game for sure was an anomaly in the sense of perfect storm. They have a lot of talent. Last year they had a lot of talent, but they didn't play that well, and we played great. I think the roles reversed. That's what happens when the talent gap is that big, and then combined with the perfect storm of size. Like, they're a really big squad. So they just destroyed us. And then, I mean, even the day before, I think Andrew, he's a big Kansas fan. He was like, we just lost to West Virginia. We're freaking horrible. Like, I think it was the perfect storm of that. Like, I think we just came off a good win against Texas Tech. They just came off a bad loss. like perfect storm of we get beat by 50. You know, I think that's the possibilities in this league when you're playing. We're in the SEC, quote unquote, of basketball. So this could happen any week. I think how we responded to the next two by beating Colorado and then playing a good game against Arizona, I think that's what our team is. You know, we're going to be in it for the most part with a chance to win it. It's going to be those little things that kind of differentiate most of the games if we win or lose. So I'm excited. And yeah, at right now, we're playing Arizona State and a winning at half. But Ben also wanted us to tell you guys about coming to the UCF game versus BYU February 1st. It's basketball alumni weekend to honor the back-to-back ASUN champs of 04-05. So 2 decades ago. I don't want to put an age on, you know, how long it's been, because Ben's going to be there. He's super excited. I'm like, goodness gracious. It made me start thinking, I'm like, holy crap, in a couple of years, it's going to be 10 years since the Peach Bowl. I'm like, man, I'm getting old. But like, so like, I just thinking about that. But he's saying like a lot of people are going to be there. Everybody come show out, even guys that currently live in Europe. He said Gary Johnson and Roberta Moriton. I hope I said their names right. To come out and support those guys. So I wanted to give that a shout because, again, it's one of those things where you never want to forget where you come from. You never want to forget those guys, you know, no matter how far removed we get from it. You know, our basketball program is where it is now because those guys laid that foundation, you know, back in the early 2000s. Hopefully 20 years from now, I'll be able to say the same thing about our teams. You know, like that's just something you don't ever want to forget, even as the time goes by. So you want to give those guys appreciation. Again, I was like 7 years old when that happened. But, again, I respect what they built because I know how hard it is to play in that kind of time where you're not respected. You're not that team that is looked upon and you're like in a, you know, kind of a startup company in a sense. That's what they were. And then, you know, they played great. And now that's what, you know, they won that conference and now they get to be able to come back and, you know, get represented and get shout out a little bit. So everybody should come show up February 1st versus BYU.
Yeah. And, you know, definitely show out and support and that was back-to-back teams. That, I mean, UCF has only made, you know, the March Madness tournament 4 times in program history. And those 2 of the 4 years were those 2 years, 04-05, when they were the ASUN champs. So definitely one of the obviously best teams in UCF basketball history. So definitely come out and support. You know, otherwise for UCF basketball, you know, just finish up on Arizona, you know, close game, lost. They shot well in the game, but, you know, ultimately, you know, kind of got out rebounded and just, you know, couldn't really get it going from 3-point either when Arizona shot pretty live shot 40% as a team. So, but yeah, then, you know, UCF's back at it today. Hopefully they can put the loss to Arizona behind them and beat Arizona State. Right now it is tied with about 10 minutes to go in the first half. Arizona State, you know, right now is, you know, they're 10-5, not horrible. But they're 1-3 in the conference. So I think this is a big opportunity for UCF to kind of, you know, we talked about, you know, if UCF can get somehow to, you know, I look, there was, I think 4 out of the 8 teams, Big 12 teams that made the big dance last year had 10 or 9 or 10 conference wins. And there was a couple that had more, like 13, 14, the top tier teams in the conference. But if UCF can get to 9 or 10 wins in the conference, I think it's very possible that they're going dancing. And with 2 wins right now, you know, they're about 7 or 8 wins away. So getting a win against Arizona State tonight would go a long way, especially when you talk about having Iowa State as one of our next opponents in their top 5. We have Houston coming up. We have a lot of really tough games. So not that Arizona State's easy, but that's going to be one of the easier games that we need to go ahead and get the W there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's always that threshold that people measure. I think we have enough of I know Ben talks about like the quad 1, quad 2 kind of stuff. I'm not super nuanced in it, but I know, like you said, if we can get to 9, 10 wins, that's probably the line where like, okay, you're going to go dancing somehow because you get the benefit of the doubt of being in the conference. Like if you can win 10 games in the SEC, they look at you very fondly. You know, I think they're like, okay, yeah, if you can win that many, you're going to compete no matter where we put you anywhere in this country. You know, I think so. If we can get to that threshold and take care of the games, I'm not saying we're going to win them, but like you said, the easier of the games when you have to play Iowa State, you know, number 2 in the country, Kansas top 10, Baylor top 25. You want to take care of the games, quote unquote, the easier ones, you know, because you kind of almost chalk that up that we're going to lose. You know, anything can happen, but just on paper, So if we want to get to that 9-10 win threshold, we got to win those.
And yeah, I agree. And it's really encouraging how we're playing on the road when you talk about beating Texas Tech on the road, then hanging tough with Arizona, making an 8-point game, and now, winning in Arizona State right now, and obviously a close game. It's good to see how the guys are playing on the road. And Roger was not lying when he said Keyshawn Hall's on fire. Keyshawn Hall has 22 of UCF's 27 points so far. He's 9 of 10 from the field and 3 of 4 from beyond the arc.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's heating up. And this is only the first half.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe see a program record here or something.
Let's get a 50 ball, man. 50 piece.
Let's see it. Let's do it. So we'll monitor that game, but we're finishing up here. So Trey, let's just finish up with the other sports that I don't watch. As we know, women's basketball is struggling. They have lost 7 straight games. They haven't won they're winless in the conference. And now they just, coming off a loss to TCU, 81-90 or 90-81. So they're struggling, but hopefully they can turn around. Their next game is Oklahoma State on Saturday. So we'll see, but they're obviously struggling right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alan, not Alan. I think Ben has kind of hinted at it. Ben and Roger. That one's going to be a little bit more slow of a rebuild. I think it's hard to replace. I forget her name. That one ended up going to Georgia and a couple of those players. It's hard to kind of follow in those footsteps and build it back. It's almost like we're starting from scratch. Going in the Big 12 and then getting a new coach, new foundation, new players. It's hard to build, especially in women's basketball. So it's going to take time. I don't necessarily watch them enough. I'm just assuming that's the growing pains, especially when you have the UConns trotting around. Like those kind of teams are just powerhouses that are already getting their players and getting it in. Like it's going to be hard for us to do that. So we'll see. I mean, the thing about basketball, at least that I've noticed, it only takes one stud to change everything, especially in the women's basketball.
So true.
If you get one just stud, they can carry you to heights, that you might not think you should be in. And I think that's all you need, just one kind of person to kind of jumpstart the program. I think that's how it is for sure, at least in the women's basketball. And just how I looked at it. Because that's just what I think. So I think if you can just find that one player, and like I said, I don't think we're short on talent anywhere. I think it's just highly densely populated state, sunshine, so everybody there's a lot of athletes and players. So I think if we can just find one, that might be able to jumpstart the program.
Absolutely. So we'll see what happens there. Then just kind of final things, our women's tennis team is ranked top 25 in the Intercollegiate Tennis Association preseason ranking. And that's their first top 25 preseason ranking since 2018. And they start their season on the 19th. So this Sunday. Other than that, we're going to go now, either going to sleep or you're going to finish watching this UCF basketball game against Arizona State. They're up 5 right now with about 8 minutes to go in the half. Other than that, Trey, you got anything else, or are you ready to call it a night?
No, man. I mean, it's another week closer to football season.
Yes, sir.
I know we're still a basketball show, quote unquote, #Elite 8. But I think we have a new reinvigorated fan base, which I think is good. And I think that, to me, I feel like that kind of thing rubs off on everybody. I mean, I went back and watched the press conference the other day, and just seeing Coach Dawkins interact with Frost and seeing Coach Malone and watching them, it brings a juice to him back into to every program, because you don't attribute all the success to Frost, but Frost has that quote unquote aura. It's when he comes back, it's a big deal, and I think it kind of jumpstarts everybody. Okay, we're back in business. Let's us do it too, so we can get the eyes back on our program, because Frost is going to bring the eyes back. It's going to be a matter of us getting it right on the field, but we're going to have that shot to build ourselves as a school, as a program. For the most part, it starts at the football field. I think as long as we can keep it up, with basketball and keep getting guys in softball and baseball, everybody, if we can keep doing that, we can get to that perennial top 25 program everybody talks UCF should be. I think that's where it's going to happen. So I'm excited, and obviously that's my guy. So, I'm excited to get him back back home. But yeah, man, I'm excited about everything going on at UCF right now. I don't think I would have ever said that. What, a month ago? I think. How long is Frost been
True.
there?
I mean, when it was still Gus here, it was things were looking pretty bleak.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I was so down. I was like, what are we? Because I mean, realistically, we were like, we're not getting out of this Gus deal at least till next year, at least. And who are we gonna get? That was always my huge question. Like, yeah, we can get off with Gus, but who do we go get? I don't know any big time up and coming guys that come. So. Perfect storm. Hopefully, it's a perfect storm again. I'm super excited about it. But yeah. For now, we're a basketball show that we're Elite Eight bound. That's what I've been saying for the longest. So.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited too. Obviously, yeah, definitely, a big difference that a month can make. With Frost here, the excitement's still really high. He's getting in some great transfers and building this roster back up. So, I think next year is definitely gonna be one of the more anticipated seasons in recent memory, just because of the nostalgia of Frost and everything that brings. So, but yeah, that's all I got. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Obviously, all of our podcast episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the places where you get your major podcasts, and we'll be back at it next week.
Go Knights, baby. Charge on.
Charge on. Go Knights. See you guys next week.
Yeah, man. Man, we got to